Welcome to the Friday Habit with Benjamin Manley and Mark Labriola II.
The Friday Habit is for creators, entrepreneurs, and agency owners looking for actionable ideas on how to grow their business and be more profitable.
We'll pull from our combined knowledge of over 20 years and interview thought leaders that will inspire you and give you the motivation you need to kick your business into high gear. Buckle up. It's Friday. Hey, and welcome to the Friday Habit. Today is a Thursday, but it's my birthday today. And because of that, I thought that it'd be appropriate, or actually really Ben thought it would be appropriate for us to celebrate that a little bit here and have a conversation a little bit about my life. But also I thought, hey, why don't we go live on Facebook, my page, because it is my birthday. So if you're listening to this, we'll make sure that the video of this is up on our YouTube page so that you guys can watch this as well as enjoy the audio version if you're just tuning into our podcast.
Yeah, awesome. Dude, I'm super excited to do this. I have lots of questions for you. I want to kind of dive in and learn more about your life, how you've gotten to this point, and I'm just happy to be able to hang out with you on your birthday. So I got a icebreaker question for you as usual. Are you ready for this?
I'm always ready for the icebreaker question.
All right, cool. Would you rather live one life that lasts 1,000 years or live 10 lives that last 100 years each?
Oh, wait, say that again now. Would I rather live one life, 10,000 years?
Yeah, that's right. Or live 10 lives of 100 years each.
Ooh.
Yeah.
Now, is it the same life that I'm living in the sense of, am I the same person, or is it like I'm being reincarnated into another person, but I get to keep all my memories and emotions and feelings? Because it's almost like the same thing, right? If I live for 10,000 years, then I essentially get to see all the technology and all the things that take place. But if I live 100 years, it might be more fun to live 100 years of one life 1,000 times, because then it's like, if you're like, yeah, I'm ready for a reboot on this sucker, you can just at 100, you just die. And then it's like, you come back as somebody else is like, you got another shot. And then if you could keep all your knowledge.
Dude, that's what I think that would be amazing, because I'm always like wanting to try new things, and it would be like your life could become an experiment. Nobody actually gets like two shots like that. And if you had the opportunity to learn from all that stuff, start over and actually keep some of your knowledge, that would be pretty epic.
I think it would be pretty epic. Yeah.
I think that's a goal for you, on your birthday today, as you're looking back, then, hey, think about what you've learned and pretend that you are starting over today and live the rest of your life like you have another shot.
I like that, Ben.
That's my attempt at an inspirational. All right. Hey, let's move on to something more important. Would you rather be without elbows or without knees?
Good question. I think that I would rather be without knees, because I think about all the times you bend your arms within a day to do certain things, feed yourself, anything like that. I could walk around like a wooden soldier all day, and I don't think it'd be that big of a deal. You'd get used to it after a while, right?
Yeah, totally. I mean, I know this wasn't one of the options, but I think I would prefer to have one bendable knee and one bendable elbow, and then one straight arm. So I could kind of hop around if I need to, and then I still have one usable arm, and then like one useless arm and leg.
That sounds pretty ridiculous, and it seems clunky. Like after a while, you'd be just stumbling out everywhere like this broken robot.
Yes, that would be ridiculous. All right, so just a quick note, if you're listening to this and you're enjoying our podcast, please subscribe and leave us a review in the Apple Podcasts app. It really helps us reach more people and grow our community. And normally our community, we're talking about business-related stuff. We are going to cover some business-related stuff today, but mostly I just want to kind of celebrate Mark and also just get some of his backstory, because I think, as entrepreneurs and business owners, it's cool to kind of see where other people have come from and where they've ended up, how their past has shaped who they are now, what they've learned. So I want to get into some of that stuff, asking Mark some questions today. So Mark, let's dive in. Are you ready?
I'm so ready.
All right.
Yeah, I'm ready. It's interesting because, I have another podcast called How'd You Get Here? And it's usually me interviewing people on their stories on how they got to where they are. Everybody, whether you're a successful business person or a entrepreneur or a creative, has some sort of story. And I feel like a lot of times people think that, oh, I could never do X, Y, and Z because I came from a certain background, or, they probably had some sort of silver spoon or advantage that I didn't have. And so what happens when we hear other people's stories is that it encourages us and reminds us that, we're not so far from where we want to be, and we have what it takes within us to be successful. And so I'm usually the one on the other side of this interview asking people questions. So I think it's fun, and it's endearing to me that you, as my friend, want to interview me on the podcast. And, hopefully my story would encourage, anyone who listens to this. So,
yeah. All right, let's start at the very beginning. What are some of your first memories? Like, what's the first memory you actually can go back to in your mind?
Yeah. It's interesting because, I think that we try to remember certain things from our past or experiences. And I've kind of done that exercise to kind of think back, like, how far back can I remember? And it's kind of weird. Like, one of my biggest memories, or like one of the first things I can think back to, is I was probably 2 years old, maybe 3 years old. And I remember making snow angels in the like little lawn area. My dad used to live in a trailer park when I was really young like that. And I just remember this like memory of me just like, and it was nighttime, or like maybe 5 o'clock in the winter. So it was dark. And I just remember like making a snow angel, which is kind of like weird, but that's cool. That's like my first memory.
Making a snow angel. That's the first thing you remember ever doing. That's awesome.
Yeah. What's your first memory?
Oh, well, the show isn't about me, but let's see.
I know, but now I'm curious. Like, what is the very first thing you can remember?
I think the very first thing I remember, I think it was like my second or third birthday, and I had a sandbox out back, and I remember my birthday getting like some like little earth mover kind of, I forget what they're called, but like kind of like a backhoe, but it's not a backhoe. I can't think of what it's called. A bulldozer. It was like a little bulldozer toy, and I was playing in the sand out there. I think I remember my dad coming home on my birthday. I was out there playing. He came out on the back deck, and he would always like take his shirt off and like beat his chest like Tarzan. That's such a random thing. But I think he would do that when he came home and be like, I'm home. And he would like pretend to be Tarzan. I don't really know why, but and just being excited that my dad was home. I think that was probably my earliest memory.
Nice.
I was in Alabama. Where were you?
I was in Colorado, actually. Yeah.
Okay.
I think Broomfield, Colorado, where my dad used to live back then. So
that's really cool.
Yeah. So
what was your childhood like? I know some stuff, and when you told me some of this stuff, I was like, what in the world? So everybody buckle up. There's some stuff coming up that you wouldn't expect, which is kind of interesting. But yeah, what was your childhood like? From that memory on, like in the next few years growing up, what was that like?
This was a very interesting story. And I would say probably one of the reasons why I had some success on American Idol back in the day, because it is such a unique story. But my parents back in 1981 had me, and shortly after that they split up. And my mom, kind of a free-spirited hippie type person, took my sister and I with her to California. My dad in his early 30s, late 20s, just a young kid, really, when I look back on it now that I'm 40, was kind of left alone in Colorado. And, and so I don't have many memories of that time. That was essentially from the time I was really small, like maybe a year old, something like that, until I was about 2 or 3 years old. So I lived with my mom during that time when I was a really young, baby. And then my dad just felt like, he became a Christian and kind of changed his life and was kind of on this path of restoration in his own life. Mm-hmm. And so he just felt like, hey, it's not right for me to be estranged from my family, and I need to kind of like restore this, relationship. Mm-hmm. And so, he went out to California where he kind of had some leads of where we might be. And, when I was living with my mom, we lived in all sorts of weird places. Some might call them like crack houses or just really dilapidated communities. And then as well as like Hare Krishna temples and other types of communities that would bring us in and feed us and stuff. We were really poor. But my dad kind of found my sister and I in this really destitute situation and brought us to Colorado. And then, I had kind of had memories of my mom, but I, didn't really know her, but kind of remembered her, and lived with my dad until I was 4 years old. And then when I was 4 years old, my mom called my dad, said she was kind of coming through town and needed a place to stay. And he was like, all right, you can, stay for the night, and that's it. Mm-hmm. And then in the middle of the night, she took me, she kidnapped me. And, as a kid, I didn't really think about it because I knew her as my mom. But, we were on the run for 6 years. So 6 years of my life was kind of traveling from place to place. I spent most of my time in Hawaii, where we lived, just very impoverished and in all sorts of different situations, weird tree houses and junkyards, and just hung out with the most eccentric, strange people. And, kind of bounced around the islands of Hawaii. And then there was a season where my mom had this boyfriend, and he was from Alaska. And so we spent some time in Alaska and Fairbanks and Anchorage. And during this whole time, my dad was kind of looking for me and trying to find me. And he actually hired a private investigator to search for me because I was, a missing child. And so in 1991, when I was 10 years old, my dad found me, and we were living on Maui, and they ran this whole sting operation. And it was interesting because it was April 1st, and the principal comes to the office or comes to the classroom and says, hey, Mark, you need to come to the office. And being that it was April 1st, I was thinking that Denise, my mom, Denise, that maybe she was going to like pull me out of school early and we were going to go have an adventure or whatever. And when I got to the principal's office, there was like 2 police officers there, and they're like, hey, do you know that you're kidnapped? And I instantly just started crying. I broke down and, freaked out because I had known that I was kidnapped. Denise would often threaten me. Like if I was being a bad kid, she would often threaten me and be like, hey, I'm going to send you back to your dad if you don't behave. And I would be like, no, don't. Because as a kid, my dad was very, he was very like tough. He was very hard-hearted. He grew up in a very abusive home, and he never learned how to love, and so there wasn't really a tender side to him. And then also he had a lot of, worries and fears about us turning out like Denise, and so he was always kind of overprotective and overbearing and over controlling because he was afraid that we would, become drug addicts and, really screw up our lives. And because of that, he was really tough on us. And I think because he didn't know how to love, he just responded in a way that was always angry or, frustrated. And as a kid, I kind of picked up on that energy a lot. And I always just thought of him as being kind of like mean, and so Denise would always threaten me like, hey, I'm going to send you back. So anyways, when they found me, it was like, oh, the gig's up, and they took photos of me and faxed them back to Colorado, and they put me in this foster home, and they kind of just stripped me away right away and then brought me back to Colorado. And that's where, for the first time I was reunited with my dad and my sister, who I hadn't seen in 6 years.
So your dad literally didn't even know if you're alive at that point, right? So
yeah. I mean, I think that he had kind of known, because as he had hired these private investigators to like find me, I was in and out of school, so I wasn't like consistently in a school. And Denise would change my name or call me different things like that. And they had actually found me when I was in Alaska, actually, and my dad told me the story that they had actually found me while I was in Alaska. And the company that he was working with at the time was going to do some sort of like extreme, like a re-kidnapping of me kind of thing to get me back. And so, he essentially was, he's like, I think that'll be too traumatizing, which it probably would have. And I'm thankful that didn't happen. And so, yeah, I mean, that's that portion of my life. And like I said, during that time, I experienced a lot of terrible things, saw a lot of terrible things. Denise really didn't have the most savory characters as friends. And, I was exposed to a lot of things that kids shouldn't be exposed to. So, yeah.
What were you like as a kid? Like your personality in that kind of time? Did you shut down? Did you come to life? Like, did you like the adventure? Like, what were you like as a kid?
Yeah. I mean, for me, Denise was a very eccentric, carefree type person. She was just this wild flower power person. It was like everything was some sort of sign and every interaction. So it was just, as a kid, I was very bubbly and happy and the entertainer, tenderhearted. I think I wasn't really somebody who was introverted or anything like that. I was definitely an extroverted type person. And so, yeah, I mean, I think as a kid, I just remember trying to be the life of a party, make people laugh. And then I also had the ability to sing at a young age. I kind of had a self-awareness of my voice, being able to the sound above average, as I like to tell people. And so, I kind of, would sing a lot, was into the Beatles and Elvis and music and things like that. So
did anybody teach you? Did you have any like vocal coach or anything like that? Or was it more like just self-taught? You just kind of picked it up because you know it sounded good?
Yeah, it was all kind of self-taught. And then, but it was like, I understood that the reaction that I was getting from people when I was singing was like a very positive reaction. Like it was like a surprise, like, oh wow, this 8-year-old kid, 9-year-old kid, like can actually like sing, like. And I remember actually when I first came to back to Colorado, my dad was going to a particular church and we started going to this church and he put me into the choir, and the choir was going to have this really big choir event at this retirement home. And they'd been working on it for months and months and months. And so when I joined the choir, the teacher was like, well, unfortunately, like you don't know the songs and, this event's next week. And so I was just like, hey, if I learn all the songs, could I be in the choir? And I'm like 10 years old, but I got my little cassette tape of all the songs and I like listened to them as I was, going to sleep every night, and I was memorizing the songs. And then like before they got on the bus to go to this, recital, the choir teacher was like, all right, like, you think you memorize these songs, kids? Like, all right, go ahead, And I like sang the songs back to him, and he was taken aback by my voice, one, because he hadn't heard me sing yet. And then that I'd memorized all these songs, and then he like was like tearing up, like physically, like starting to like get emotional and cry, and I was like, oh wow, like this is cool,
What made you so motivated to do that, to like get in with that choir? What kind of was driving you?
I mean, I think it was one is I was kind of like this odd man out. I had come not knowing anybody, moving to Colorado as a little kid, being taken away from the only family I knew. And, I think it was just something that this idea of like, okay, like I know that if I put my mind to this thing, I can like do this, like this is like my gifting or my skill set. Like, let me like prove everybody wrong, you know?
Yeah. So what was that like then, changing, living with your dad and kind of growing up? And then I'd love to hear about kind of that transition into what was your first job? What does that go like?
Yeah. So again, it's like another chapter. Yeah. I think if I ever write a book, right, there'll be like these chapters of these stories.
Part one.
Yeah. Yeah. So then that kind of brings us to the second scene of, I'm 10 years old and, disconnected from Denise, really wasn't able to say like bye to her or anything like that. Did some family counseling as a kid. We'd go to this space and they would allow us to, talk on the phone, to Denise. And the thing is that she had kind of been lying to me like my whole life. Like there were so many things that like, even her name, like in different arenas, she may be Lakshmi or she may be Genevieve, she kind of had like people knew her by different names. So, and then even her age, like one of the things that really like hurt me the most, like impacted me the most was that, she had lied to me about her age. Like I remember having birthday parties for her, celebrating like her 24th birthday or something like that. Right. When really she's like, 34 or something like that.
Yeah. Wow.
And as a kid, I didn't think like, I wasn't like, oh, what year were you born? Whatever. It's like, oh, we're having a party for my mom. She's 24. Like, okay. Like none of that stuff made. And so when someone's like, no, Denise, is her name. And like, she's 34 years old or however old she was, it was like, no, she's not. Like we had her birthday last year and she's like 20, it's like,
wow.
And so like,
yeah, you were in it deep. Like there was you didn't even know what was real and wasn't real.
Yeah, exactly. It was crazy, man. It was so weird. And it was a 10-year-old kid. It's like, what the heck, Yeah. And so there was like this really difficult period, I think, when I was really young like that, like from 10 years old to, 12, yeah.
Do you feel like that, does that change like how you see the world or people ever? Like the idea that you were in something for 6 years and you thought that was the reality and then you had a complete perspective shift. Does that make you more cautious or does it make you wonder, what else could happen like that? Or,
No, I think what it does really is it gives me empathy for a lot of different people and situations, and it allows me to kind of like see the perspective. Like, sometimes we hear these stories on the news. We hear these, like how could they ever do this? And for me, like I think back and they're like, oh, they must be some malicious psychopath, And then I think back to maybe situations that I experienced. I was like, well, I knew some people that weren't malicious psychopaths that did X, Y, and Z. So I wouldn't necessarily go down that path right away,
Right.
And so I think if anything, it's given me more empathy to understand like where someone else may be coming from for a particular situation and not judge so harshly into a situation, without getting all the facts and understanding all the different things,
Yeah, that totally makes sense. So from there, as this kind of being the next chapter, where did that take you? I know that you kind of pursued some of the singing, and I want to get into the band and that kind of stuff. Yeah. But like, what comes next? Did you start working some jobs in a career? Did you pursue music, or what happened next?
Yeah. So at 10 years old, got really involved with a church, made a lot of good friends, started singing regularly, would enter into like national singing competitions and different things like that as a kid, within our little, sphere. And, kind of lived that life, and at the time my dad, he was still pretty, afraid that my sister and I would turn out like Denise. And he still didn't have a capacity to, be tender and loving to kids because he was never modeled that and never showed that. And so he was really tough on my sister and I and, did a lot of things that I'm sure, that he would take back if he could. And then, a lot of times because of the, church we were involved in and the, religious nature of the church that we were in, it was this idea of, if you spare the rod, you're going to spoil the child, So he thought, well, if I discipline these kids enough, they'll like turn out okay and be good, But as a kid, I just felt that, it was more abusive and it was more hurtful, and so I really lived the double life in the sense of, I was kind of living in fear at home and as a kid, kind of always walking on eggshells and being afraid of like, when is my next, spanking going to come, or when is, like I'm going to do something wrong and then, my dad's going to fly off the handle and be angry with me and punish me unproportionate or improportionate to, the thing that I did wrong or whatever. And so that kind of went on for, a lot of years. And then when I was 14 years old, I was a freshman in high school, and there was Little Caesars Pizza. And at Little Caesars Pizza, if I got a worker's permit from my counselor, I could get a job at Little Caesars Pizza. And so I went to my counselor and was like, hey, I want to start working. And really it was like a way for me to get out of the house. It's like, all right, if I'm not home, then I can't get abused. I can't, get hurt. And so I got a worker's permit and, went up and really hit it off with the manager there. I was kind of a nerd. I loved like Star Trek and Star Wars and, was just kind of into all this nerdy stuff. And so was he. And it's funny because, he's like, I think minimum wage was like $4.25, and he's like, I like you, Mark. I'm going to give you $4.50 an hour. I was like, yes.
Thank you, sir.
Yeah. I was like, this is awesome. I was like so excited. And so started working at Little Caesars Pizza and I absolutely loved it. It was like my first job and it was a way for me to get out of the house and I could make some money. And then I started meeting other people, that were kind of my age. And I remember very vividly, Creed was playing on the radio. So this dates me. Creed was on the radio, and I was like washing the dishes or something like that. And I was singing this song, and then there was like this other guy, at Little Caesars who was also singing the song, and he sounded pretty good too. And I was like, "Hey, man, like you sing?" He's like, "Yeah." And he's like, "I sing," and we kind of just hit it off. And he was like, "Hey, do you want to come to youth group with me?" And again, it was like another thing to get me out of the house and less opportunity for me to be punished or, get in trouble for something. And, my dad had kind of left this church that he was a part of that was, very legalistic and fundamentalist and, really abrasive church, and he'd kind of left and was kind of on his own discovery path of like what was next for him and his faith and all that. And so he was kind of open to the idea of me, going to youth group. And you have to like understand, like, when I lived with Denise, it was like I was like I would cuss like a sailor as a little kid. Like I had a foul mouth, I was like this street kid, this hood rat from like Hawaii. Like, and it was always like, we were broke and it was like, I got to get mine. It was like this mentality of like, if I don't take it, like, I'm not going to get it. And like, I mean, I would steal hundreds and hundreds of dollars worth of toys from the store. And like, I was just like this really like broken down poor kid who, was struggling. And like I said, like cussing like a sailor and doing all this other kind of stuff. And, when I moved in with my dad, it was like a complete opposite.
Whiplash.
It was like he was going to church 3 days a week and, like dressing up on Sunday, and wearing suits and all this other kind of stuff. And then I wasn't allowed to like listen to any music, and music was like a huge part of my life, in childhood. And it was just like, you can only listen to hymns, and I couldn't even listen to like Christian rock, like DC Talk or Jars of Clay. Like, and I remember, I was kind of saving my money and whatnot, and I had bought like this Discman, and I went to Walmart and I bought this like this really cool Discman, like had like skip protection and all these like things. You remember those, right?
Yeah, I do. Yeah.
And so I got this Discman, and then I had a buddy at school who was really into music. And he had brought me some CDs like Elvis and the Beatles' White Album, which, is one of my favorite records. And I would like sneak listen to this music. And the same thing, like when I was walking to work or walking to school in the morning, I would sneak listen to the radio, because I wasn't allowed to listen to, non-hymn music, it was like, so I was kind of like sneaking music and listening. I'd babysit my cousin, and my aunt kind of knew how, intense my dad was. And she would like leave out CDs, of like Sheryl Crow and Warren G. And I would like I'd put my cousin to sleep, and then I would like listen to music, all night. Uh-huh. And so I remember this one time where my dad, like, I had this starter jacket. I don't know if you remember the starter jackets from back in the 90s. It was like the puffy jacket that had like a big pouch in the front that Velcroed, and you'd get your favorite sports team and, have this like, puffy jacket. And so I had the CD player in this jacket, and somehow the play button got pushed. And I was like leaving the house, and he was like, he could hear it. He's like, "What is that?" And I was like, "Oh." And he like found the CD player, and like it had like a Elvis CD in it or something like that. And he was like furious with me, and he like took it away. And I had lied. I said, "Oh, that's my friend's like CD player and his CD. Like, please, like." So after a few days, I was like, can I just take it back to him at school? And I, took the CD player back, and, like diverted that catastrophe. But yeah, so started going to youth group, and with a buddy of mine, and we were able to just spend time together at work and at youth group, and really found a core group of friends there. Many of them I'm still friends with, to this day and know. And when in the youth group, they actually let the kids lead all the music. And so there was this graduating class of like all the seniors led the music, and they were all graduating. And so there was like, okay, we need to get a new group of kids to do the music. And so, my friends and I, we had one friend who kind of played acoustic guitar a little bit already. We had one friend who was played quads like in drumline, at school. Mm-hmm. And then my buddy I worked with, he's like, well, I'll learn how to play guitar. And I was like, well, I sing because that's what I do, so I'll do that. And so we started this band into youth group, when we were sophomores in high school, freshman and sophomore in high school, and we just started, doing our thing. Uh-oh. You know what time it is? I hear the train.
I didn't get to the mute button quick enough. It's too
That's
late.
All right. That's right. All right. For anyone who's tuning in, Ben's offices are near a train yard. And so from time to time, you will hear that train whistle, and that is my cue to play our train song.
It's part of our brand at this point.
That's right. Anyways, and so we started a band, and just started learning, church songs and things like that, and playing music. And that was a great escape for me, All right, we're going to pause this conversation here. Go to thefridayhabit.com. There you can find show notes for this episode. There you can also find links to our websites and ways to get in touch. At the bottom of the page, you can download our guide to the Friday Habit System that will show you how to set aside one full day each week dedicated to working on your business instead of in your business. If you're not already, make sure you subscribe. If you enjoyed this episode and want to hear next week's episode, subscribe so you get notified. Also, leave us a review in Apple Podcast app or wherever you listen to your podcasts. And if you want to potentially be on one of our episodes with a question you ask us, go ahead and record a quick message in your phone, voice memo, and email it to hello@thefridayhabit.com. Until next time, live every day like it's Friday.